Chapter 6, Halasan Mountain. Irvin finally got a break after filming. He was sipping his coffee when Steven came and sat next to him.
You look so stunned at the meeting today, Mr. Director. Who would have thought Janet Amari would be working with us, let alone sitting on our own chair?
Steven sighed in a dreamy way.
It's like a dream come true, isn't it?
Irvin's angry glances made Steven scoot away.
I see you're not feeling it.
He stood up,
I'll come later.
but Irvin stopped him from leaving.
Sit.
Steven quickly sat back down.
What's up, bro?
You signed the contract without my permission.
Irvin answered coldly. Steven scooted closer.
So, you're saying that if I had discussed it with you, you would have rejected Janet Amari?
Maybe.
Steven was shocked.
But it's Janet Amari!
I know. Stop saying her name.
Steven stood up,
Irvin, come on!
You know what, Steven?
said Irvin as he also stood up.
Maybe you're right. Let's just say I'd consider signing her because it's for business.
Steven nodded, still confused.
Uh-huh.
It really annoyed me that you did it without asking, and the fact that you're always causing trouble just makes it worse. Understand?
Irvin paused, took a breath, and then looked away.
Just when Sky and I were on good terms.
Steven's eyebrows lifted at his last comment, but Irvin continued.
Wait.
Irvin softened as he began to think.
I could use this as an excuse. I didn't sign it. You did. If I tell her that, she wouldn't be mad at me.
He nodded.
Yeah.
Then Irvin walked off, leaving Steven awkwardly alone. Steven wasted no time and sprinted after Irvin, his heart racing with anticipation.
Irvin!
He shouted, desperate to catch up.
Hold up, man! What's the deal with you and Miss Schuyler? What happened yesterday? Did you guys talk it out?
The next morning, Schuyler had been looking forward to seeing Irvin all day. When she arrived at the shooting location, she was met by Steven, who informed her that Irvin had gone home early to pack for their trip to Halasan Mountain tomorrow. Oh, the Halasan Mountain scene! That's amazing! Schuyler gasped, her eyes widening at the thought of filming at one of South Korea's most beautiful locations. I can't believe you guys were already on that scene. It's going to be incredible, she exclaimed, her mind already buzzing with ideas for the scenes they could capture. Steven could see the enthusiasm in her eyes and chuckled. His voice was brimming with anticipation as he replied,
Just wait till you see the shots Irvin has planned. It's going to be phenomenal. And of course, thanks to our amazing writer here. Hello?
Oh, stop it, Schuyler chuckled, adding a flick of her hair. How long will you guys be there?
2 weeks. We can extend if needed.
I won't see Irvin for 2 weeks? Then you guys better make it worth it, Schuyler forced a laugh. As she was walking away from the set, she saw a familiar figure in the distance. It was Janet Amari, the girl who had been the catalyst for the downfall of her relationship with Irvin. Schuyler quickly hid behind a nearby tree, hoping that Janet wouldn't see her. She watched as Janet walked up to Steven, and the two of them exchanged a few words. Schuyler couldn't hear what they were saying, but she could tell that they were talking about the trip to Halasan Mountain. Schuyler's heart pounded in her chest as she watched them from her hiding spot behind the tree. She couldn't believe her eyes. Why was Janet at Irvin's filming studio, of all places? And what was she doing talking to Steven about their trip to Halasan Mountain? The memories came flooding back, the arguments, the lies, the texts. Schuyler had tried her best to move on, but seeing Janet brought all the pain and anger rushing back like turmoil. She clenched her fists, feeling the familiar sting of bitterness and resentment. What a leech, she said, eyes piercing through Janet as she watched her and Steven laugh in deep conversation. Yup, it's just a leech. The insistent chirping of a bird outside Ethan's window was the first thing to rouse him. He grumbled, pulling the duvet tighter around him, hoping the sound would fade. It didn't. Then, a much less pleasant sound began, a persistent tapping on his door. He groaned, sitting up.
Just a minute.
He rasped, his voice thick with sleep. He glanced at the clock on his nightstand. 4:30 a.m.
What in the world?
The tapping sound became increasingly insistent. Ethan was getting really annoyed. He angrily opened the door, expecting to find his landlord asking for rent. But it wasn't the landlord. His boss, Skylar, looked flustered and held a travel suitcase.
Miss Katz, what are you doing here at this hour? I thought I was off today.
Yeah, she said, her voice breathless. But we have a problem, a big one, and we need to leave right now. Ethan blinked.
A problem? What kind of problem?
We need to get to the airport. Now. I've already booked the tickets and everything. It's a surprise. I can't tell you where we're going. Ethan rubbed his temples.
Skylar, I'm not in the mood for surprises. I need to know what I'm getting myself into.
It's about Irvin's movie, she exclaimed, shaking his shoulder vigorously. There's something wrong with the source. Ethan's brow furrowed.
The movie? Source? Miss Katz? The source came from you. What could be wrong?
Skylar shook her head, her hand trembling slightly. No, it's worse. It's about the story itself. It's all wrong. We must go to Irvin and talk to him before it's too late. Inside the cramped confines of the airplane, the air crackled with tension as Ethan seethed with fury. He had discovered Skylar's deception, her cunning ploy to use this work trip as a cover to spy on her love interest, Irvin.
How could you lie to me like that?
Ethan hissed, his voice barely above a whisper.
You jeopardized my day off for a personal vendetta.
Skylar's eyes filled with unshed tears as she met Ethan's gaze. I'm sorry, she muttered, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to deceive you. I didn't want to come alone. She stammered, her eyes wide with guilt. Also, I just needed a change of scenery, and you're my editor. You deserve a break too. But Ethan wasn't buying it. He knew Skylar. This trip, this elaborate charade, was all about Irvin.
Miss Katz, you're a talented author. You shouldn't let your emotions cloud your judgment. If you can't trust Irvin, then maybe he's not worthy of you.
But Ethan, Skylar protested. Irvin is always this layback kind of person. It's that leech I don't trust.
And what if they're together?
Ethan asked gently.
Remember, it's been 5 years?
Skylar looked away, her heart heavy with doubt. Never, she whispered. I have to see it for myself first. As the plane ascended, Ethan and Skylar sat silently, their thoughts swirling in different directions. Ethan worries about the consequences of Skylar's actions, while Skylar can't shake the feelings of Irvin and Janet together. The air inside the plane felt thick, like a giant stuffy blanket. Skylar, slumped in her seat, was fighting a losing battle against a headache that felt like someone was drilling into her skull with a rusty spoon. She groaned, clutching her temples.
Miss Katz, you look like you've been dragged through a hedge backward,
Ethan said with a concerned frown. Skylar moaned, unable to respond.
Where are your meds?
He asked, rifling through her purse. I don't know. Check in there, Skylar muttered weakly. He rummaged through her backpack, a black hole of crumpled papers, half-eaten granola bars, and who knows what else. He pulled out a crumpled pair of socks, a travel-sized tube of hand cream, and a bag of gummy bears.
Really?
He wheezed, holding up the gummy bears. Skylar moved her tired eyes to him and saw it. She let out a guilty laugh, his brow furrowed in a mixture of concern and annoyance.
You forgot to bring your meds, didn't you? How many times do I have to tell you to bring your pills everywhere you go?
The sound of the airplane's engine was so strong that Irvin could feel it in his bones as he stood up, feeling his knees crack from the effort. Even though he was in a fancy first-class seat with comfortable leather and free champagne, he really needed to use the bathroom. He quickly looked at the map on the screen above his seat and saw that the bathroom was just beyond the curtain that separated the first class and economy sections. As he finished, a familiar voice sliced through the muffled chatter on his way out of the restroom. His feet stopped walking.
It couldn't be. Skylar?
He whispered, his hand hovering near the curtain. His breath caught in his throat. He indeed saw Skylar, perched in her seat. As quickly as he could, he pulled back the curtain.
Why is Skylar here?
Her face looked pale, though, and she looked kind of pissed, too. He recognized the man beside her, Ethan, who she was clearly mad at. Ethan seemed to be preaching to her about something she didn't want to hear. Driven by a mix of curiosity and trepidation, Irvin pressed his ear against the curtain, eavesdropping on their exchange. "But I thought Skylar's voice was clipped, almost angry.
You have to understand that your health is not like others.
Ethan was practically yelling now.
It's the air, the pressure, the stress of air travel. It could trigger more to what you're already dealing with.
Irvin's heart sank.
Wait, is Ethan complaining about Skylar's health? What kind of health issues is she dealing with?
Skylar had finally reached her breaking point. "Ethan, you're driving me crazy!" Her voice piercing through the air. "I've already apologized. Can't you cut me some slack? I'm older than you, you know." Despite the tension, Irvin couldn't help but crack a smile. Skylar's fiery personality was just as captivating and exasperating as ever.
Who's driving who crazy? And can't you act your age for once?
Ethan shot back, his frustration evident.
Respect is the last thing on my mind right now. You're in pain, and I wouldn't say I like seeing you suffer. I might have to take charge of your medication from now on.
Ethan shook his head.
I'll check with the flight attendants for some pain relief.
Skylar's lips curved into a grateful pout, revealing the depth of her emotions. "Thank you." Just then, a booming voice from the other side of the curtain startled Irvin.
Excuse me, you are blocking the aisle. Could you move, please?
Irvin quickly pulled back, his face flushed, and stammered out an apology. He scurried back to his seat, his mind racing. He stole glances in Skylar's direction, feeling incredibly worried. Should he approach her? No, Skylar might not want that. There must be a reason she's here, and she would have told him if there wasn't. Then he remembered something and reached into his handbag. Just then, a flight attendant was approaching.
Excuse me.
He called out. After a flight attendant gave them some Advil, another flight attendant handed Skylar a small vial.
"Here are some essential oils that might help."
The woman offered with a warm smile.
"The gentleman sitting just beyond that curtain overheard your conversation and wanted me to give you this. They're very calming."
Thank you,
said Ethan, gratefully accepting the vial. He carefully dabbed a few drops on Skylar's temples, hoping it would provide some relief, and it did. Skylar felt her headache slowly fade as she closed her eyes. She smiled as she sniffed. "It smells good, too. Tell that sweet gentleman thank you." The luxurious resort atop Halasan Mountain was famous for its stunning views and exceptional service. The cast and crew had gathered at the resort for a much-needed break from their demanding filming schedule. As the actors and crew members checked into their elegant hotel rooms, an underlying tension lingered behind the scenes. Janet stood not far from Irvin, keeping her eyes fixed on him. Sitting a few couches away from them, Skylar and Ethan had their faces covered with face masks. Skylar tightened her fists while glaring at Irvin and Janet. "Look at her staring at my man," she muttered.
Your man?
Ethan whispered.
When did he become your man?
Skylar didn't answer. In fact, she was too furious to hear Ethan. That night, as Janet finished her shower and wrapped herself in a soft gown, she headed out of the restroom and into her room. To her shock, she found an unexpected visitor waiting for her. He was a man in his early 30s, with a look of adoration in his eyes, which sent chills down her spine.
"Who are you? How did you get in here? Get out!"
Janet cried, her voice trembling with fear. The visitor, a passionate fan, reached out to her saying,
Janet, my love, it's me. I love you. I'm here for you.
He attempted to calm her down, his earnest expression revealing his deep affection for her. She backed away towards the door, calling out for help.
Someone, please help! Please help me!
She cried at the top of her lungs. Janet's screams echoed through the hotel, attracting the attention of the other guests and the hotel staff. The visitor lunged towards her, grabbing her by the wrist. Janet let out a blood-curdling scream, hoping that someone would hear her cries for help. As the commotion continued, Irvin, who was in his room in the same hall, heard a desperate knock at his door. He quickly rushed to open it and found Janet's manager, Peter, who appeared distressed, screaming for help.
Irvin, Janet is in danger. Someone broke into her room. Please go help her.
Irvin rushed towards her room without hesitation, pushing through a few people standing at her open door and looking inside. They were hesitating to help, afraid the intruder might harm her. Irvin got into Janet's room and was immediately shocked by what he saw. The intruder, a man with intense, wild eyes consumed by an unsettling obsession, had Janet trapped near the window. He clutches her close, refusing to release her. With a calm yet authoritative voice, Irvin commanded,
Let her go, now.
The intruder turned towards Irvin, his expression instantly shifting from adoration to rage.
She's mine. She belongs to me.
He shouted, tightening his grip on Janet.
Right, Janet?
He said, looking back at Janet, whose face was a mask of terror.
You said you love me. You told me you love me.
Without a second thought, Irvin charged at the intruder, knocking him off balance and away from Janet. A struggle ensued between Irvin and the possessive fan. Irvin managed to overpower the intruder and restrain him, while panicked bystanders shouted for hotel security. Stephen arrived at the spot and quickly helped Irvin pin him down. The intruder, realizing what he had done and his dreams shattering around him, attempted to explain himself to Irvin and Stephen.
She told me she liked me. She gave me the extra card to get inside her room.
He stammered before breaking down in tears. That caused Irvin to shift his gaze at Janet. Still whimpering from the sudden intrusion, Janet looked at Irvin with pleading eyes.
He must have misunderstood me,
she said, trying to maintain her composure.
I love all my fans.
Her voice trembled.
Don't worry, Miss Amari,
said Stephen.
You are safe now.
The hotel security rushed to Janet's room, and the hotel manager called for backup. Before long, police arrived at the scene. As they took the irrational fan into custody, Janet broke down in tears. Peter rushed to comfort her. As the chaos subsided and everyone returned to their rooms, Peter hesitantly approached Irvin and asked for a favor.
Janet is really shaken up,
he said, his voice faltering.
Do you mind if she stays in your room tonight? She's just not comfortable being alone.
Stephen nearly choked, and Irvin furrowed his brow in confusion.
Wouldn't it be nice for her to stay with you? It might make her more comfortable since you both identify with the same gender.
Peter let out an exaggerated sigh.
That's exactly the problem, Irvin. I'm a lady and she is also a lady. What if something like this happens again? I won't be able to tackle him down like you just did to that psycho.
Stephen exuded confidence as he strode with his head held high.
If you don't mind, how about she stay in my room? I was known as a kung fu master.
Peter suddenly stepped forward, closing the gap between him and Stephen.
If you don't mind, I would like you to come stay in my room. You know, we could,
Stephen hesitated and gulped.
I just took a drowsy pill. I'll be dead asleep. I won't be able to show my kung fu tonight.
Then he turned and left. Irvin rolled his eyes at him. Peter sighed, eyes drilling at Stephen until he disappeared to his room.
Just my luck.
He then looked at Irvin with pleading eyes.
Please, Director Irvin. I'm pretty sure you're not one of those who are taking advantage of her vulnerability, and everyone here can reassure you that. Besides, it's only for tonight. I just want her to be safe and feel comfortable.
Irvin's silence was deafening. His gaze shifted to Janet, her tear-streaked face a painful sight. With a heavy sigh, he acquiesced. Peter's eyes lit up with gratitude.
Irvin, you're a lifesaver!
He beckoned Janet to join them, her steps slow and hesitant.
So here is what I would like you to do, Janet. You will sleep in the same room with Irvin tonight.
Janet's shock was palpable.
What?
Her eyes darted between Irvin and Peter.
We don't need to impose on him, Peter.
Peter gave her a reassuring squeeze on the shoulders.
Trust me, Irvin promised he'd take care of you.
He said. Irvin couldn't help but almost roll his eyes at Peter's words. He hadn't promised anything to Peter at all.
But
Janet moaned in frustration.
It seems like Miss Amari is uncomfortable. Let's not push her.
Irvin suggested, ready to leave.
No.
Peter urgently grabbed Irvin's arm and made Irvin look back at them, catching both of their panicked faces. Trying to appear indifferent, Janet quickly looked away, pretending not to care if Irvin left.
Janet, I truly believe this is the best choice for your safety. Please don't be stubborn. We're doing this to ensure your safety.
Janet nodded quickly as she approached Irvin.
thank you. I really appreciate it.
Irvin met Janet's gaze, noticing the contrast between her smile and the unease he had sensed in her earlier. He let out a resigned sigh, choosing to ignore his instincts.
It was just for one night.
He reminded himself.
Hopefully it would pass quickly. Feel free to organize your things in my room. I'll be waiting in the lobby.
As he strolled down the hallway, he encountered a masked room service attendant, pushing a cart filled with cleaning supplies. He briefly stopped when he sensed something familiar, but the worker continued walking. Despite the feeling, Irvin ignored the moment and proceeded to the lobby. Room service! Emily, Janet's makeup artist, swung the door open.
I'm sorry, could you come back in about 20 minutes for cleaning? Miss Amari won't stay here tonight, and we're relocating some of her belongings to another room.
Oh, really? Which room is she moving to? Asked the attendant.
She's moving to room 215, just down the hall.
Emily responded with a smile. The service attendant's eyes widened, and she tightened her grip on the broom she was holding. Room what? Emily's smile faded, a sense of unease creeping in.
Room 215.
Shh. The attendant placed her finger to her mouth. You shouldn't say that number out loud. Emily was confused.
Why not?
The attendant, her voice barely a whisper, looked hesitant, unsure if she should tell her. She slowly gave in and leaned closer to Emily. That room is haunted.